Hi there, Jeep owners. Today in your 2020 Jeep Cherokee, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Roadmaster's Diode wiring kit. Now there's 4 different kits available. You can get those with a 4-pole connector end, which is just going to give you the necessary stuff for your lighting. And there's also 3 6-pole versions available, which will give you all of your lighting and provide some additional slots for accessories that you may want to add in the future. These 3 different ones, they're all basically the same, but you can get it with either a coily cable, which is ideal if you have a tow bar that doesn't have any cable management, a straight cable option, which is great if you have cable management so you can route it through those channels, and there's also a hybrid version because if you have a high-low adapter and things that extend it out, you may need a straight cable for your cable management, but then a slight coil end to ensure that the rest doesn't dip on the road. There's 5 main components you'll need when flat towing your vehicle behind your motorhome. You'll need your tow bar, which is the connection between your motorhome and your vehicle. You'll need your safety cables, which is a supplemental connection in addition to your tow bar. You'll also need your base plate, which provides the connection point on your vehicle for your tow bar to attach to. You'll need your diode wiring, which will take all the lighting signals from your motorhome, transfer them to your vehicle, and illuminate the lights at the back of the vehicle so people know your intentions when going down the road. And lastly, you'll need your supplemental braking system, which will apply the brakes in our vehicle when we hit the brakes in our motorhome to help us come to a safe stop. Our diode wiring is going to take all the lighting signals from our motorhome and transfer them to the lights here at the back of our vehicle. We've got the flashers on in the motorhome, and you can see that they're mimicking our lights here as well as on the motorhome. And the diodes that are installed behind here will ensure that the circuitry that's going up and sending the signal to these lights is not going to backfeed inside of our vehicle, so we don't have to worry about damaging any components in our vehicle. The diodes will install behind your taillight assembly, and we can tap into the wires for our factory lights here and make them work just like they are on our motorhome. There are a couple of different options that you do have besides diode wiring. One of them being bulb and socket, where you'll actually drill a hole in your taillight and add a bulb that is going to be providing all the illumination lights from your motorhome. But in a lot of cases, this isn't going to work, especially on modern vehicles with LED lights, because there's just no place to put that bulb. The other option is magnetic lights, where they just stick on the roof, but with those you have to set them up every time you want to tow, and they do have pads on the bottom to prevent scratches to the top of your vehicle, but over time those pads could potentially wear out, and you may eventually get some abrasions. In addition to the diodes and wiring that you'll receive in your kit, which is everything from here back, you'll also receive a connector here at the front for making your attachment. Here we're showing off a 6-pole version, which is the most common version, as it does provide those additional slots for more accessories. Our customer chose to install a charge line kit, and we've got that hooked into our 6-pole here. So if you went with the 4-pole version, you wouldn't have that. The cool thing is, if you do go with a 4-pole version, and if you want to add accessories in the future, you can just get a 6-pole, and you can easily splice and wire that in right here up at the front. The 6-pole connector does come included if you got the 6-pole kit, as well as a cable to make that connection. We're currently using the coily cabled option on ours because our tow bar doesn't have any cable management. If you are looking for a tow bar that has cable management, I highly recommend Roadmaster's Falcon All-Terrain, as that will provide a channel that runs down the side for not only your straight cable to run through, keeping everything up off the road, but you can also run your safety cables through that channel. And it just makes everything a little bit nicer. You don't have things flopping around, and when you go to store everything in its storage position on your tow bar, everything stays very nicely neat and wrapped up with the tow bar. Now that we've gone over some of the features, let's head into the shop and you can follow along with me and we'll get these installed together. Now the first thing you're going to notice here is that the fascia is removed, because the best time to install your diode wiring is when you're putting your base plate on. You'll have a lot more room to work and it'll make everything a lot easier and you'll complete the job a lot faster. We started by routing our wire. I do like to leave a little bit of excess here in the front to ensure that we've got enough to work with. And we went ahead and went from our mounting location for our electrical circuit here at the front on our base plate. We followed it down the side of the bumper and we went underneath the headlight. From here we went around our washer bottle and then we went up into the engine compartment next to our battery. From there we just followed the factory wiring around the battery in the fuse box, around the back side of the fuse box, and from here we need to go pretty much straight down underneath the brake reservoir, because we're going to run it underneath the vehicle to the back from there. Here you can see our brake lines, and this follows right up to that brake reservoir up there underneath of it where it attaches to the master cylinder. So here's our wiring coming down. We just kind of followed those brake lines down. And an easy way to get this down here if you're struggling with it is to use a fish wire. A metal coat hanger works really well because you can just kind of poke that down, attach the wire to it with some tape, and then pull it through. But from here, we then go above our undershield here, and we just run it straight back down there. And this, you can just poke the wire in there. It's not really a big deal. You will see a white wire hanging down here because at some point you do need to ground the white wire to the body. And I use some of the excess white wire to help jumper our diodes from one side to the other. So right here at about the middle of the car is where I cut it because I have a nice easy access point where I can hook my ground up right here. And then I can use the rest of the white wire that I cut off for a jumper wire when we get to the back of the vehicle. But the rest of our wires continue on. And we just follow it along. We tucked it behind the brake line wires, behind the brake lines. We went above our gas tank there. And then we come out here, tucking it above the brake line again. We make sure we stay above our suspension components here because we don't want to touch anything that's moving or excessively hot. And we just stay all the way above those suspension components, staying above our exhaust here, trying to stay up as high as possible. And we went ahead and zip tied it and wrapped it around our factory wiring here because we know this is going to be far enough away to where it's not going to get damaged by the heat. At this point now we'll need to split our wiring here because our green wire needs to go over to the passenger side, and this is the rest of the white wire that I'd cut off. This is just going to jumper from the passenger side over to the driver's side. So we routed these wires behind the bumper panel here. They're behind the panel going all the way across, that way they stay away from our exhaust. And from here we route them up behind our taillight assembly. Fish wire trick works very well for doing this also. Back over on the driver's side, the remaining wires, we've got the yellow and the brown, and again we have to jumper the white from one side to the other. These route over and then up behind our driver's side taillight. At the back of our vehicle now, we'll have our lift gate open to expose the bolts we'll need to take out so we can get our headlight out of the way to get that wiring routed up. We'll use a T27 torque socket to remove these two bolts. The taillight assembly can then be removed by pulling straight rearward, but if you're having a difficult time, a plastic trim panel tool like this can make things a lot easier because it won't scratch the paint, and we can give ourselves a little bit of extra pry to pop it out because there are a couple of tabs right there that hold it onto the vehicle. We can then disconnect the electrical connector that's holding our light in. You'll want to just push the red tab away. That'll unlock it. Then we can press in on the release tab behind the red tab and pull it off. We can then set our taillight assembly aside, and we're going to remove the other side as well. We've got our connector now. There is some tape that's going to be on it. We did peel a little bit of that off to expose the wires to make it easier to get to them. And we're going to be using pins 1 and 3. So pin 1 is going to be just a solid white wire, and pin 3 is going to be our white wire with a yellow stripe. Both of those wires is what we're going to be tapping into. We're now going to take these two wires and we're just going to cut both of them. We can then strip back each end of these wires to begin making our connections. After stripping each one of these back, we're going to be installing the blue spade terminals on them that come pre-attached to your diodes. They simply just pull off of the diodes. And to make things a little bit easier, you can twist the wires. That'll just make them slide in to the spade terminals a little easier. Spade terminals will just slide on, and then we'll crimp it down. We're now going to repeat this for the remaining 3 wires that we stripped back. Now that we have all of our spade terminals attached, the wires that we routed up, we're going to need to separate each one. You can do this by just cutting between them. And then once you've snipped each one, you can just peel it back. We're just going to peel it back far enough to make them easy to work with. Each one of these now will need to be stripped. With each one stripped back, we can take the brown and the white wire, because again, we're using this white wire as a jumper to bring the brown wire signal over to the other side. We're going to twist these two together This one is going to use the yellow spade terminal because it's a larger inside diameter, so it'll easily fit over 2 wires. And then we're going to crimp that on. Then on the other wire here, this is just going to get another blue spade terminal. We can now start connecting our diodes. The circuits that we chose here, the white wire and the white with yellow stripe. The white one is going to be our stop and turn signal circuit, and the white with the yellow stripe is our tail circuit. So our diodes will always connect the outside to the connector side because this is going to the lights. So we're just going to go ahead and start with the solid white wire. So we're going to plug the connector side in there. We're going to reconnect the other end of our white wire that we had cut to the in circuit. And then on the other in circuit, we'll need to attach our signal wire for the stop and turn on the left side, which is going to be the yellow wire that we ran up. We're then just going to do basically the same thing with our other diode here for our taillight circuit. So we're going to reconnect the 2 wires together that we had cut. And then the brown wire is our taillight circuit. So we're going to plug that in to the other end. Now at this point, you do have some double-sided adhesive here. You could stick it behind here, but in a lot of cases, it's pretty tight back here, and it can interfere with the light going back in. So what I found works best to help them keep them from clanging around and stuff back here is to just take the 2 adhesive pads, peel off the backing, and then just stick the 2 together. Over here on the passenger side, we've done basically the same thing. Here's that white wire that we used as a jumper from our brown wire. And over here on the passenger side, we're still going to be using pins 1 and 3, but the wire colors have changed. Pin 1 is going to be a white with a green stripe, and that is our stop-turn circuit for the passenger side. And pin 3 is going to be a white wire with a gray stripe, and that is our tail light circuit for this side. So just like we did over there, we cut these 2 wires, we put spade terminals on them, we connected them in and out, and then we just got to make sure we put the wires that we ran from the front back here to the correct one. So white and green was stop-turn. Our green wire that we ran is stop-turn, so we connected it to there. And again, this is our jumper for tail. We just connected that there. We can now reinstall our tail light assemblies. So we're just going to plug them back in, push in the lock tab. We can kind of tuck these guys down to keep them out of the way. Line up the 2 prongs here with the slots on the back, and then just give it a little push until it snaps into place. We can then just reinstall our screws. And we'll reinstall the other side the same way. We're now back underneath to where we had routed our white wire. This is going from the front because we need to have grounded our connector that we're going to put up there. And we're just going to run it right here on the bottom of the vehicle. You don't want to run it into the floorboard, but this part right here is not the floorboard. We can tell it's not because right here, if you look up, there's a hole here and we can stick our finger pretty high up in it. So this is just a sheet metal that has a cavity above it that's not inside the vehicle. So we can go ahead and cut off some of the little bit of excess that we've got here. So we're just going to trim it down to about there. We can strip this wire back. And then we're going to use the ring terminal that comes included in our kit to crimp it onto our white wire. We'll then use the included self-tapping screw and just run it right into the bottom of this panel. Now back at the front here, we can connect our wires to our electrical connector. You will either have a 6-pole, which is what we're going to be using here, or you may have a 4-pole that's pre-attached depending on the kit that you've got. If you got the 4-pole, then I would recommend just bundling up your excess and mounting it here at the front. But if you got a 6-pole, we're going to show you how to connect that. But before we do, I highly recommend that you finish your flat toe setup at this point, because if we connect our wires right now, our fascia is not going to be able to go back on. We're going to have to put the fascia back on first and then connect these wires for everything to pass through nicely. So I've gone ahead and finished all this up. I'm going to go ahead and get the fascia back on, and then we'll get this connected. So we've gone ahead and kind of held the fascia up where it's supposed to go. You can see here we're hitting on that breakaway switch. So I've gone ahead and made some marks here where we're just going to trim out this section for that breakaway switch to pass through. We're just going to use some snips to cut it. And we just want to just double check to make sure our breakaway switch is going to pass through. And it looks like we're going to be good there. It also looks like these are going to line up. So as you can see here, it looks like our two little prongs here aren't sticking quite far enough through. So we are going to need to do some trimming on those to make them fit. And here's the back side of our 6-pole. This needs to pass through so that the two holes here can line up with our bracket there. So this section here we are going to need to trim out a bit to make it fit. And so I've gone ahead and made some marks. We're going to go ahead and trim this out. Yours is going to be fairly similar than this. Again, it's going to may vary slightly just because there's not an exact location for this connector here, but it's going to be very similar. And now we're just going to test our fit. And it does look like we're going to need to make a little bit more trim in this section for it to come out. When we're attaching your fascia, on the bottom we had to drill a rivet out, and we're going to be replacing it with a plastic rivet that comes in our kit. There'll be one for each side, and you need a plastic rivet gun to do so. We'll slide our rivet in the gun, we'll slide our gun up, and then we'll just squeeze it, and it's going to pull it. You may need to repeat that process a couple times until it snaps the end off and holds it in place. Now that we've got everything trimmed out, we're going to go ahead and cut off the excess wire that we've got here. I do like to leave some excess, just if we need to do any repairs in the future or add additional accessories, we can easily slide this out. So we're just going to cut that there. And then kind of like we did at the back, we're going to separate out each one of these wires by snipping in between them. And then once they are separated out, we are going to strip each one of them back. If you have any other additional accessories that you're going to connect to your 6-pole, recommend you prepare those too. We have a charge line circuit we're going to be doing, so we're also going to be adding that as well. If you want a charge line for your Jeep, you can pick a kit up here at etrailer.com. We've got them all stripped back now. Before we connect it to our connector though, we'll take the boot that comes included with it, and we're going to slide that on first. And we're just going to poke that up in there for now, just because we need to have it on there before we can make our connections. So now we can take our 6-pole connector now. We're going to start connecting everything. We're going to need the circuits labeled TM, which is tail light, and it's going to be our brown wire. So we're just going to unthread that. GD, which is ground, and our white wire. LT, which is left turn, and our yellow wire. And RT, which is right turn, which is going to be our green wire. If you're running a charge line, then I would recommend connecting it to the center pin. So we're just going to poke our wires in there now and then connect them. And I do like to twist them because you don't want any little strands poking out. If you have one strand of wire that's poking out, it could potentially touch another circuit and cause a short on it, which may illuminate your lights incorrectly or potentially cause fuses to pop. So we poked our green wire into the right turn, RT label, and threaded it down. We're just going to repeat this for the remaining wires into their respective circuit. Now that we've got all of our circuits tightened down, we can bring our little rubber closer. Before we connect it though, we are going to seal this all up to keep out any moisture. And I recommend you using dielectric grease to do this. You can get dielectric grease here at etrailer.com. And we're just going to goo it up all over it. You can be generous with it because we do want to make sure that we are keeping any moisture from getting into our circuits. We can then slide the rubber boot on, and then I like to tape our rubber boot around each end using some electrical tape. We can then go ahead and attach our connector to the mounting location on our base plate. We'll now want to make sure that everything's working properly. We've gone ahead and plugged it into our tester, but you can plug it into your motorhome to verify that everything's working. You want to make sure you have your tail lights, your brake lights, left turn signal, and right turn signal. With everything working properly, we can just go back through our wiring and zip tie up any loose ends, and then we're ready to hit the road. And that completes our look at Roadmaster's diode wiring kit on our 2020 Jeep Cherokee.